Welcome to the next lesson in variables, strings, and functions. This is challenge number 4, the ClickCounterArray. In this lesson, we're going to take our previous project and let's quickly just review what our previous project did. When I run this app, I simply have a button and I have a label. And each time I click the label, or click the button rather, the label changes to count how many times I have touched the button. Okay, so how did we make that happen? Well, quite simply, we created a variable that is of type integer called ClickCount, and we gave it the value 0, and then we responded to each time that button was touched by increasing the value of ClickCount by 1, and then we used this interesting little Swift function that allows us to take a number and turn it into a string by putting the variable inside of parentheses with a backwards leaning slash mark in front of it. All of that is inside of quotes, and that takes a number, turns it into a string, which allows us to assign its value to our label. We also used one new trick. We used this viewDidLoad to actually change what's on our label when it first runs. So it says clicks label outlet.text equals 0. Okay, so let's get to work on our next lesson. We're going to use an array this time. So in this project, the way that we're going to alter this app is we're going to make it so that when I run it, instead of saying 0 and 1 and 2, it's going to say the word 0 followed by the word 1 and then the word 2 each time I touch the click button. So how are we going to make that magic happen? Alright, so the first thing is that when we want to store several values, we can use something called an array. An array is simply a collection of information where all the information is the same kind of information, and we store it one after another in a row. And then we use a number to indicate which of the pieces of information we want. Declaring an array is very similar to declaring a variable. So I'm going to follow the 4 steps that are listed here, but I'm going to alter them just a little bit as I go. The first one is going to be, the first step is I write the keyword var. That doesn't change. Then I'm going to write the name of my array. And then the next thing in the list is specify the type. If my array is going to be an array to hold numbers, then I use square braces to indicate that it's an array, and I put the type of thing I'm storing in the array inside the square braces. This would make an array of numbers. And then after that, I could put an equal sign, and then I put a square bracket, and I would put each of the numbers that I want in my array. So for example, I could put a collection of numbers like the first number is 5, the second number is 5, then the third number is 3, and then 1. Let's make some numbers that are actually significant. How about the prime numbers? So the first prime number would be 2, the next prime number is 3, then comes 5, then 7, and then, let's see, I think the next one is 11. I hope I haven't skipped any. 13. You get the idea here. What I've done is I've made a list of numbers. Well, in this case, we want to store strings because we want a list of words. So I would change this int to string, and then over here inside my square brackets I would include each string that I want to store. So I could have my first value, and then I could have my second value, and I could keep putting on new values here for as long as I want. And now I've created an array called name, and stored at position 0, it's important to remember that it starts at 0, would be value 1. Then there would be value 2 would be stored at position 1, and finally, value 3 would be stored at position 2. We call the positions an index for the array. So the index of value 2 is in fact 1, because 0 is here, 1 is the second one in, and then 2 would be the third one in, which could be a little confusing when you're first getting started. Okay, so let's now make this actually fit what I want. So instead of name, what do I want to call my array? Well, I'm going to store the names of numbers. So I'm going to say number names is in fact going to be a string array because each number name is a string. And then what do I want my first string to be? I want it to be the word 0, followed by the word 1, followed by the word 2, and then we'll just do one more, 3. Now you could put as many in here as you want, but for this demonstration I stopped at 3. Okay, so now I have my array. What do I do with my array? Well, I want my array to be used to replace the number here each time I touch the button. But the very first one I want to replace is the one stored right here in view_did_load, the one that changes my initial value here from 0 so that it will say the word 0. Now, I could, of course, cheat and just make this 0, and that would be easy enough, but we want to try and do this programmatically. Okay, so how do we do it programmatically? Well, let's start by looking at click count, because click count tells us which of these numbers should be in that text. It's 0, and what is the number stored at position 0? Well, one way to look at these numbers is that each one has an index. So I'm just going to put a comment in here and say index colon. What's the index of this first one? It's 0. What's the index of this one? It's 2 or 1. What's the index there? 2. The index here is 3. Okay, so if I want to have this piece of text appear here, what I do is I use my array name, which is called number names, and then I specify the index of the particular one I want, which is 0. So I'm going to take what's stored at number names 0, which is the word 0, and put it on my label. Let's run the program and let's see if that works. And sure enough, I have 0 here. But when I click the button, I just have numbers, and I want these to change to also be my numbers. Well, based on what you've just seen, that should be easy enough. All we have to do is go into the click button action here, where I assign the name, and change it so it says number names. Well, then the question becomes, what do I use for my index? Well, notice that click count started out at 0, and what number name did I get? I got 0. Then, before I do anything else, I'm adding 1 to click count. So, if I were to put number names click count here, what would be the first one that I would get when this button is touched? Well, click count becomes my index. It's going to have a value of 1 because it started out at 0 and then I added 1 to it. So it's going to have a value of 1, which means I'm going to get the word 1. And the next time I click it, I'll add 1 again, which will give me 2, and off we go. Let's see this in action. Okay, so then the question is going to be, does it work? Well, 1, 2, 3. But what do you think is going to happen when I click it again? Is there a 4? And there isn't, so watch what happens. Alright, so this ugliness occurs. And I've got to start looking at what happened here and see if I can figure it out. The first thing is that it highlights the line that caused the error. And what caused the error here was that I tried to assign a value from my array that doesn't exist. And if you look down here, it says fatal error, array index. Remember, the numbers here are the index, out of range. Because I tried to put ClickCount4 into that text label, and there is no ClickCount4. So what I've got to do, if I want to make it so that my program works, I've got to find some way to respond to what happens when I run out of names. And there's a simple way to do this, but first we have to stop our program by clicking the stop button over here. And then I want to see my storyboard again, so I'm going to click on storyboard. There we go. I'm just going to rearrange my window a little bit so it's a little bit clearer. Okay, so I now need to do something to make sure that this line doesn't cause an error. And what I want to do is make sure that click count is never bigger than the number of names that I've stored here. Now you would think that you could do this just by saying, okay, if click count is less than, how many names do I have? I have 4. Oh, you know what? It's Swift. We don't need those parentheses. I have to remember that. If click count is less than 4, then I want to put this label in there. Okay. Now, will that work? Will that keep me from getting an error? Let's see what happens. Let's run the program. Click, 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 and well, I don't have an error, but I'm also not seeing any numbers. So, let's fix it. Let's make this an else statement. What do we do if click count is greater than 4? So if click count is 4 or more, rather, what do we want to do? Well, in that case, we just want to go back to using our old system where we say that the clicks label outlet.text is equal to what we had before, where we made it a string. We used the backslash character, and then we used parentheses, and then we turned click count into a string. So what will happen now? Now I will run my program, and let's see if what happens when I go past 3. Now I'm back to using numbers. Well, that seems great. It looks like this is a solid little app. Nothing's going to crash. But you know what? I decide I want to add a 4th number. What's going to happen here? I'm going to run my program. And the question is, will I actually see 4 appear? And notice I saw the number 4. Sorry for that little interruption. Notice I saw the number 4, not the word 4. And the reason is that I said here that click count had to always be less than 4. And there's a better way to do this. There's a way to find out how many number names I have by using numbernames.count. Now, numbernames.count automatically goes back and counts how many number names I have. How many do I have in this case? Well, the index of the last one will be 4, but if you count, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 names in my numbers list, which means it'll use those number names up to the 5th one, and after the 5th one, then it will start using the digital numbers, the digits. What happens if I get rid of one of these? I delete it. I'll be back to counting up 1, 2, 3, and then the number 4. And so the program responds automatically to keep from generating an error, which makes this a much better way for your program to be written. Okay, so all you need to do now is go and read the rubric, and you're going to notice that there's quite a bit of extra modifications you need to make in order to get a good grade on this assignment. Good luck!